Here's part 3 of our mood lecture. So we'll just keep going here. We did these first 4 already. There's the 4 from previous videos. Alright, so we'll do size and glory today. Let's start with size here. Okay. Size. Okay, this is basically if you want to make anything feel large or you want to make things feel small. Okay, and it's usually that focal point that you want to explain that way. So if you want your focal point to feel massive or you want your focal point to feel tiny, this is kind of what you do. The biggest thing you will do is use size contrast. Size contrast. Which I'll explain in just a second. You also use a sense of scale. Sense of scale. Okay, and those are pretty much the main things. So for size contrast, it's just contrasting the size of different shapes, okay? So let's say you had a focal point shape like this. This little triangle, we'll go abstract here. All right, so it's pretty small already within that composition, but if you want to make it feel extra teeny tiny, you just surround it with these big shapes. So I'm contrasting the size of that one triangle with all these other abstract triangles. So we can make these trees in a forest, or they could be people, or they could be buildings, whatever it is, but now this small one is going to stand out and feel very different than all the rest of the ones. I'll probably also color it in dark, so now it really stands out. And so that's a good way to do it, to make it stand out. So now we got an extra small little shape. You can do the same thing the opposite way, you know, with the character. So if I want to make this character feel like a really big character, what do I surround this shape with? So if this guy's big, just surround him with a bunch of small characters. There we go. Okay, so now the focal point character, the big guy, first he felt kind of big, and then adding in all those smaller shapes around him made him feel really big. Okay, so using that size contrast, just contrasting the size of your focal point with other things. Okay, so how do we use that sense of scale? You guys have probably seen this in photographs or movies or video games as well. It's just using something that we know the size of to compare it to something else. Okay, so you know, really simply, say we had kind of like a rocky cliff here that goes down to the ground. How big is this cliff? We don't really know right now. This could be a 1 foot tall. It could be 100 feet tall, whatever it is. But so I have to include something in here to give people the relative size of that. So let's say I come in here and I put a big like semi truck down here. So now we know the size of this semi truck approximately. You know, we know about how big a truck is. So now we got, you know what, a 50 feet tall cliff there. Okay, so I can even put some like little people here. I could put a little person up here. So now we know that's a pretty big cliff, right? And usually we use people for a sense of scale, okay? So our average person, you know, 5.5 feet tall, whatever it is, adult person, 5.5 to 6 feet tall. We get an idea that that's about the size of a person, so that will help us. It's really used a lot in like fantasy, comics, or adventure movies or video games, things like that. So now we got here a giant, sea monster is what I'm drawing. Okay, got our sea monster. But how big is our sea monster? How big is this guy? We don't, again, right this second, we don't really know. Okay, so let's put in a scuba diver. Now we know, okay, we got about a 6 foot tall person there. So we got a pretty big monster, 20, 30 feet long. But as I mentioned during the last videos, we want to make these moods as clear and straightforward to the viewer as possible. And we want to kind of exaggerate these moves so it really stands out to people. Okay, so what I will encourage you to do on your projects, in your thumbnails and the drawing challenges and things like that is really exaggerate that mood. So what we could do then is just make this person smaller. Now we have an even bigger monster. Okay? Now how could I make that even bigger? I can make this a submarine now. How do you draw submarines? So now we got a submarine. So that thing just went from being about 20 feet. So now this thing's like 200, 300 feet long compared to that submarine. Okay? So just think about what you want to compare it to. What will make the most interesting composition and what will get you the most kind of size contrast through the use of scale or through the use of size contrast shapes. Okay, so this is a pretty fun one. I definitely recommend trying it out and seeing what you can come up with for some of those options. Okay, so that's size. And our other one today is going to be glory. Glory. This is awe, so anything that inspires awe or grandeur or power, any sorts of those adjectives. So the biggest thing with this is radiating lines. This is a fun one to do. And also symmetrical composition. All right, so as you guys may have noticed as we're going through these and we're doing more and more, each mood does not completely stand on its own. Okay, usually it will be, there's some overlap with other moods. So as you saw, like using size, that can go along with strong. Glory can go along with strong as well. So you can kind of combine these, but as you're drawing your thumbnails for project 3, I want you to try and really focus on one mood, and then if another mood gets in there a little bit, that's completely fine. That will definitely happen. So radiating lines are basically any lines that just radiate out of the center. Okay, so radiating lines. So this is something you may have seen in nature or seen in real life. If you've ever been, observing a sunset somewhere is where I oftentimes see it. So you have our big, strong mountain, back to Mount Rainier. And so we got kind of the symmetrical composition going on, but if I really wanted to put this over the top and give it some awe, give it some glory, really make it feel magnificent is another adjective. You see some radiating lines coming through here. And you will actually see these oftentimes in a sunset, different times in nature. And it really just, if you ever see it in real life, it just gives you that kind of feeling of, wow, I'm just witnessing something glorious and amazing, powerful. Okay, so these ones are kind of subtle because I'm trying to make them, slightly realistic-ish. But what you can also do is combine them and treat them more like abstract shapes. Combined with representational imagery. So let's say we got someone here giving a really powerful speech or something, give them a little yell horn, whatever these things are called. Put them up on a little stage, got some people watching, observing. Very rough sketch we got here. Even though this is a representational image, a very simple representational image, if I wanted to kind of add in some glory lines, I don't need to do those realistically. I don't even need to, you know, like worry about, oh, is there a sun behind them or is there whatever behind this person? I can just make these into, now these just become basically abstract shapes. They're not trying to represent anything real. I'm not trying to make this like a spotlight behind the person or a sun. I'm just treating these as abstract shapes. You come in here if I want to put some values in here. Why not? Let's go a little lighter. Why did I go lighter there? Well, because I don't want as much value contrast on those radiating lines. I want the most value contrast right there on my focal point. So when we do these moods for the project, I'm going to be looking for all the normal stuff we've been working on. Rule of thirds, symmetrical, leading lines, value contrast, clear focal point. All that stuff with a mood then put on top, okay? All right, so that's glory, okay? So pretty simple. You can, you know, I've seen people, you know, have fun with this thing, and rather than putting like a, you know, that interesting or powerful of imagery in here, you know, maybe they come and put like a pig here or something. Now we have this weird, glorious pig. So it's kind of playing with it then at that point. Now we're kind of, you know, making a little joke. We got, why is the pig full of glory? Who knows why? It's fun and it looks cool. So I suggest playing around with all these different moods, kind of see what are more easy or what are more difficult for you to draw. But both of these ones are fun to play around with and try different things with. So let's look at some artist examples. Here's some glory. Here's an actual photograph of the pyramids in Egypt. There we go. There's a sunset, and that's an actual thing. So the setting sun's rays going through the clouds creates these lines. And look just how awesome and powerful and magnificent and glorious that looks there. So next time you're out, you know, hiking or near the water or somewhere during a sunset, see if you can find some glory lines going through the clouds. Here's an illustrated example, an old magazine cover. So yeah, the person here is representational. It's a realistic drawing of a person, but all these lines behind it, they're not like trying to draw the sun. They just become abstract shapes. And here is an example from The Princess Bride. If you guys have ever seen this movie, classic, amazing, awesome, one of my favorite films. But this is a scene where this character, he's trying to access some mysterious power, talk to his dead father through the sword. So the cinematographer and director, you know, put lights behind the person. Well, actually, that might be the sun. Well, they planned out that shot so they get those rays of light coming through the trees there. And that works for that, you know, specific moment in the movie. Okay? So they can be more subtle like this, like rays of light, or, you know, more use of abstract shapes like that with an illustration. So just play around with them. You can kind of try some different things. Here's some size ones. So used to make things feel very big or very small. So we got two very small focal point characters surrounded by large shaped characters there. So we're contrasting the size of those things. Here's a cover for the Hulk. Here's the Hulk. We know the Hulk. We already know the Hulk is a big guy, big character, like 10 feet tall or something. So that means this monster here must be absolutely massive. We have a small focal point, and using that sense of scale to explain how big that person is. I forget if I showed you guys, I think I showed you guys this one during the shape lecture, but this is Eyvind Earle. We can revisit this one. Small person, giant dragon, good sense of scale to explain how big that dragon is. Another Eyvind Earle piece. Oh, here's a photograph. So this is a massive redwood tree. The only reason you know it's that big is because that person's in there. If I crop this out, sure, that's a nice tree, but we don't know how big the tree is. When we put that person in there, then there's a sense of scale to really explain how big that person is. So like I said, most of the time it's using a person to explain how big something is. Here's kind of an illustrated version of that with a small character atop a large stump. So very big trees there. Here's a screenshot from Iron Giant. Small focal point, giant robot. And here's a version where we're a little confused. Is this a giant cat or a miniature train set? Well, obviously a miniature train set, but it's kind of playing around with that sense of scale where it's kind of trying to trick our vision and trick our eye there. All right, so that is glory and size.